Trump's new plan. I think the shortened version is called TRIP.
Well, the Zangezur corridor, yeah.
The Zangezur corridor TRIP. I mean, it's very innovative. It's radically different, obviously, from the Atlanticist involvement of Washington in the South Caucasus, right? The Atlanticist part is absent, which is great. So this is very practical, very Trumpian. He wants his Nobel Prize, Mr. Trump. So he tries to go ahead.
Just the proposal is to connect the eastern part of Azerbaijan, which has to travel through a part of Armenia.
Zangezur corridor. On the other side is
on the other side. There's the enclave, right? Connect those two, which then connect to Turkey and so on, and connect those with a strip of basically a highway, right? Under U.S. administration, which very coincidentally also is right at the border with Iran. I can't see any kind of problem arising from that fact that you basically now have a US 99-year lease, although this is what's in the plan that has not gone yet through the Armenian parliament, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So this is something that actually Trump wants personally. This is also very innovative, and this. If you recall the whole theory and concept of South Caucasus being used as a bridge between major powers without actually tearing it apart through wars and instigations, right? This is this closest that it could theoretically get to that concept, where the South Caucasus could be used as a geopolitical space, where both the United States, Europe, and then the 3+3, right? So the South Caucasian, all three South Caucasian states, Turkey, Iran, and Russia could sort of coexist. Now, I hear a lot about, is Russia losing the South Caucasus? And I really fundamentally disagree with those titles or concepts, because Russia is not losing the South Caucasus. This is mostly these projects are strictly geoeconomic projects. We know from almost 30 years ago that when Bill Clinton met with Shevardnadze and Aliyev Sr., who was a very wise leader, and when they implemented those geoeconomic TPC, the Tbilisi-Ceyhan, oil pipelines and other geoeconomic pipelines, they basically isolated Russia, and they put Azerbaijan and Georgia on the map. So Russia couldn't do anything with those geoeconomic plans. The same sort of reality is taking place, sort of repeating itself today. If Trump succeeds and finds the wherewithal to sort of move through and complete this project, then this will be yet another attempt, it is true, to isolate Russia. But in terms of geoeconomic projects, Russia can acquiesce to those. It doesn't mean that Russia is losing the South Caucasus, because really there is no existential security threat that emanates out of the South Caucasus at the present time against Russia, because Russia really nipped it in the bud when it first invaded Georgia as a result, in order to stop NATO expansion in the middle of the South Caucasus. When it did that in 2008, and Georgia being the first country who actually experienced that, Russia basically strategically stopped any threat coming out of South Caucasus, existential threat. And then they found Ukraine. Remember, Ukraine came in 2014. So now that represents an existential threat, much more so than, I would argue, Georgia for Russia. And and as a result of that, we're seeing to what extent and how far Russia is willing to go. So I think this remains to be a strictly geoeconomic project, and not some mechanism with which to shave off South Caucasus yet again from Russia, or try to.
Are you sure, though? Isn't Azerbaijan a prime contender for, the next, being made the next outpost for this kind of geopolitical pressure making on Russia? With the Zangezur corridor and the connection then to Turkey, then the next logical step to me would to extend NATO membership to to Azerbaijan and say like, why don't you join the club, right? And basically encircle from below. Okay, you don't have Georgia in the mix, but well enough. I mean, you can stage pressure, even military pressure, also on Georgia from that kind of setup, especially since Armenia now has been basically neutered. And as we had in a different talk with our colleague Pietro Shakarian, basically prepared for dismemberment. Isn't Azerbaijan a real next potential hotspot?
I would say no, Pascal, and let me explain why. Because if Azerbaijan is perceived to be perhaps inaccurately stated, but an ally of Turkey, right? It was under Turkish and Erdogan's help that Azerbaijan won the Second Karabakh War, first in 2020, then in 2023. Okay, so Turkey is NATO. And I think there was a rumor, I believe, that Turkey was going to place its troops, basically, NATO troops on Azerbaijani soil. And Kremlin made this very fleeting, very sort of cynical reaction saying, have you guys forgotten Georgia, or have you forgotten the past, or are we going to go through this again? Some sort of a cynical, in other words, uh, they're so certain that they won't allow this to happen that it's not even for them. It's not even worth commenting on. So Erdogan knows this perfectly well. Erdogan also plays a very balancing role vis-a-vis Ukraine. Yes, it has provided some drones and some weapons to Ukraine, but it never upset the fundamental balance with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Um, and so, I think that the idea here is to through Iran to dismember Iran, because northern Iran has Azerbaijani minority, which, by the way, the West has not been able to convert, because that minority is historically and very well etched into the Iranian culture and politics and economics. And so creating some sort of a separatist nationalist movement there has basically, they have failed to do it. It's become impossible. Contrary to some of the propaganda that you hear, that undoubtedly Iran is concerned about it, but they've tried too many times, and they just have failed, because that minority, Azeri minority in Iran, is very deeply etched. They're assimilated throughout history and throughout decades and centuries within the Iranian culture. So turning that into some sort of a separatist movement against Iran, I think, has failed.
Yeah, and just very quickly to add to that, I have a close Azeri Iranian friend
Yeah,
who's thoroughly anti-Tehran regime, but when the recent attacks happened, he said like, look, even I have to admit now that they were right in saying like we're being prepared for dismemberment. I mean, if
precisely.
anything, the recent 12-day war actually made the case of the government, even to also to the Azeri minority, saying like, okay, we have a problem as a nation. Yeah, so the fronts right now are rather hardening in that sense, right, against this kind of foreign interference, also in the Iranian borderlands, is the argument you're making, eh?
Correct. So the argument is, so are they going to dismember, so through Israel? Are they going to dismember Iran? And then Iran has the same problem with Kurds as Turkey has. And this is one of the things that Iran and Turkey are to get sort of support each other on. So, to what extent does Turkey need another major headache? Is another question in terms of the Kurdish minority issue, which again they share with Iran. And then, of course, there is Moscow, there is Russia, in tandem with Iran. And I think we know that Russia won't allow any dismemberment of Iran. Russia will acquiesce to maybe lesser control of Zangezur corridor. It's virtually being sort of marginalized. So will Iran, perhaps. But when it comes to, I think, security and if Trump, for example, there would be a huge mistake if Trump decides or succumbs to neocon pressure and sort of starts to militarize this very shrewd geoeconomic project. So if they start to station troops there, and if Moscow senses that this is much more than just a strategic sort of geoeconomic project, then all hell will break loose, and we will see the sort of repeat of what happened in 2008 in Georgia. Russia still has 3,000 troops in Gyumri in Armenia that Armenia still considers as a major buffer against Turkey.
Well, wait, can you explain that again? I didn't know about this. There's 3,000 Russian troops on Armenian territory.
Yeah, on mainland Armenia in Gyumri, and they are stationed. They have been there since the collapse, or since before the collapse of the Soviet Union during the late 80s, 90s, when the First Karabakh War happened and all that. So, but this is for Armenia, even ironically speaking, they consider these troops to be sort of a protection barrier against possible Turkish invasion or Turkish adventurism in Armenia, which makes this so, in a way, absurd, because here you have Armenia, who's been fighting to preserve its sovereignty via Nagorno-Karabakh, loses Nagorno-Karabakh completely. Neither the West nor Russia does anything to prevent it from happening. And now the West calls Armenia, well, just forget the past, forget Nagorno-Karabakh, and collect whatever is left of you, and maybe we can try to bring you into the West from a different angle. That's not going to work either. So
and collect what is left of you, collect the rest in the form of selling a very important stretch of land for 99 years to the United States, leasing it, right? It's like, okay, Armenia, you're really being taken apart bit by bit, and you're asked to accept it, and the Aliyev just does so. Like, Armenia is really difficult to understand at the moment.